Then I'm going to read it. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, may we please have the roll call vote?
Counselor Cabrales?
Here.
Counselor Swanson?
Here.
Counselor Carney?
Here.
Counselor Schaub?
Here.
Counselor Cornwell?
Present.
Counselor Puente?
Here.
Mayor Swenson?
Here. All right. Well, we have just one announcement today that the City Hall and the library will be closed on January 18th for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And our next item is that requires a motion in a second is appointing a new member to our Woodburn Budget Committee and reappointing 2 members to our Woodburn Planning Commission.
Mr. Mayor, I've read the appointments and I make a motion that the appointments be approved.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that motion carries. Okay, we're going to move to business from the public. Heather, is anyone who signed up to speak from the public?
No, I haven't had anybody sign up to speak.
Okay. All right. Next, we have our consent agenda, and I ask the city recorder to read the items.
Mr. Mayor, don't we have a COVID-19 presentation?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for that point of order. And I see Tony German sitting right there, so I might have been able to piece those two things together. How you doing, Tony? Good to see you. Okay, yes, so we have COVID-19 vaccine status. Thank you for joining us, Tony.
Pleasure to be here. I think, Jesse, you were going to start us off.
I was going to start off. Scott, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything to preface any of this, or?
Thanks, Jesse. Jesse heads up our COVID communication and outreach team, and we send out the weekly reports he does for the city council. Talked to Jesse late today, and I told him I'm thinking about potentially making this more of a routine update for the city council as vaccines become more of a benefit. And so tonight, I asked Jesse if he could bring some information to the city council on where we stand on vaccines. We're getting lots of questions about vaccines everywhere, everything from efficacy to what is the city's role in distribution. And I think the next big hurdle for us from a communication standpoint is going to be trying to get good and accurate information out about vaccines. The what, when, how, and why. And so, Jesse, you want to take that away?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have Dr. Antonio German from Salud Medical joining me this morning, or this evening. Man, it's been one of those days. We're going to go over I'm going to go over the vaccine distribution model, the vaccine distribution phases, or what we have so far, current vaccine distribution data that's been updated as of this morning. They might have updated this evening, and then vaccine distribution. And then I'll turn it over to Dr. German to talk about the vaccines and maybe any questions you have, the efficacy behind and the process behind the vaccine, to really kind of tie it all together. So just to kind of give a high level understanding of the distribution model, to my understanding in the meetings I'm part of, is the federal government has purchased large quantities through currently the 2 approved vaccine producers are Mrna and Pfizer. I believe there's others in the works. They just haven't been approved for emergency use yet. So OHA makes an allocation request to the federal government. That allocation then goes down and is distributed. It isn't always met to the quantities in which OHA requests, and they change quite frequently, is my understanding. But then those quantities get distributed to regional health partners. So like Salem Health as a regional hospital, they get some of the other hospitals like Salud, Legacy, et cetera. County health, county health, and so like Marion County, Lynn County, all those pharmacies, as well as approved partners. One of them that went through a lengthy process to be approved was Woodburn Ambulance. So they are actually able to administer under guidance from Marion County and OHA for direction. So, and then once OHA kind of allocates, like I said, it goes to those sub partners there. And they don't necessarily all funnel through OHA, but they are kind of sought after by OHA. So sometimes it's a direct allocation from the federal government that makes it to a partner versus it going through OHA hands, which would slow down the process even more. So the current distribution phases, well, this was actually, I put in today because this was actually last week, but they actually initially when they started, it was phase 1A, group 1 and 2. And that was really healthcare workers, long-term care, skilled nursing facilities, et cetera. As the vaccine rollout kind of progressed, they realized that they could open that up to groups 3 and 4. And so this is the list in which that kind of encompasses. And it's a lot more broad than just the standard healthcare worker. It actually includes volunteers within hospitals. It includes non-emergency medical transport drivers. It includes group care, group homes, and in-home care. It's not just hospitals. So there's several other folks. And then this guidance comes from OHA. So as you can see, if you have any questions, feel free to ask as well. So the remaining phases will be directed by OHA, and they are being evaluated by the Vaccine Advisory Committee. It's a 27-person committee that was assembled by OHA. I believe they had 650 to 700 applications to be on that committee. We as staff did apply, but weren't selected. But there are some recognizable faces on that 27-person committee, and they are working to build out in conjunction with OHA those next phases to serve the different demographics and communities. So the current vaccination data as of this morning. So as of this morning in Marion County, there has been 8,400 doses that have been administered total. And there are 336 persons that were fully vaccinated. I put in the far right column an estimation of the percentage of the population that has been vaccinated. So by those current numbers, 2.42% had been vaccinated, and 0.1% have received the full dose in Marion County. And then you can see the numbers below. Cumulative, there's been 9,700 doses administered. And it's been just over 4,000 that have been fully vaccinated to this point. And just to that point back one is there, it is, and Dr. German might go into this a little deeper, but there is, the Mrna is, I believe, a 28 span between your first and second shot. Both of the approved vaccines currently require 2 vaccines for full vaccination, and then the Pfizer is a 21-day span between your vaccinations. So to continue the vaccination information, Marion County has received doses. Initially, they received 800 doses on December 28th, in which they sent 500 within the Salem Fire Department, is what the county notified, 200 again to the Marion County Fire Defense Board, and this also went to other kind of rural fire departments. And then they had held on to 100 of those to help out with smaller healthcare facilities that weren't receiving direct shipments. And then they received a second allocation last week of the Mrna of 500 doses. And again, not to take too much of Dr. German's thunder maybe, but the Mrna is really ideal for kind of rural distribution. It doesn't require the super cold storage. So like the Pfizer does, which requires dry ice or extremely advanced freezers to keep cold, more of a standard refrigeration with Mrna. You might have also heard that there's vaccine distribution going on just down south in kind of a large quantity. So Salem Health just set up a station last week where they did a soft rollout of in one of the expo spaces at the fairgrounds, vaccine distribution. And they actually have, on January 7th, they actually announced that they did 1,700 doses in the course of a day, which is pretty impressive. And they are supposed to receive another 10,000 doses from the state, I believe tomorrow. And we actually have a meeting scheduled. I have a meeting scheduled with some representation from Salem Health tomorrow to talk about the possibility of a small allocation, around 150 doses being allocated to those kind of folks who maybe haven't been touched in our community, who fit within that phase 1A, groups 1 through 4 phase. So again, I just want to remind folks, this isn't general public yet. Unfortunately, it's not the general senior population. It is, seniors in long-term care. A lot of the senior care facilities are being taken care of by the pharmacies and things like that. There are contracts and partnerships in place. So really quick before I go on, are there any questions about the data or distribution channels before I turn it over to Dr. German?
Jesse, I might ask you quickly to talk a little bit about the survey we're doing in terms of trying to identify the issues that we can address to try to increase the rate of vaccination when it becomes available to the public.
Yeah, so city staff are part of a vaccination. Are you talking more of the education piece?
Yeah, part I think of our concern is that when the vaccine becomes available, we may not be able to, people may not want it to come forward to take it. And so we're trying to get the community prepped and prepared so that when the vaccine is available, that people will become vaccinated to help us get on the other side of the COVID issues. But it's kind of interesting. I was hoping you could talk about that.
No, absolutely. So city staff are part of a vaccination immunization committee. It's a regional committee. It covers Marion and Polk counties, involves health departments, medical partners, and things like that. And it's really focused on creating culturally relevant messaging to kind of debunk some of the myths and things like that. And so, and create messaging that is tangible. There's a lot of information out there. And unless you're fully immersed in it or you're at a certain education level, it's overwhelming and daunting and kind of debilitating, to be honest. So this committee is focused on really addressing those issues. We sent out a survey as a team last week and to different community-based organizations that serve different cultural groups throughout the Valley. And we're going to review the results tomorrow in our meeting, but there was 85 responses from different community-based organizations to talk about the different myths and types of information they're hearing within the clients that they serve. And so I think this is going to be truly key for us to create messaging that is not only educational, but not, again, not daunting, not too much information. Really, the focus is less text, more pictures, really focusing on, social media and video messaging. Radio is a key component of this. So really creating tangible messaging and tailoring it to our community. So possibly bringing community leaders involved to speak about vaccinations or things like that to really debunk some of the fears around the vaccinations and address some of the fears that are, valid as well. So.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question for Jesse.
Yes, Rob?
Jesse, some seniors in my community, constituents in my ward, are asking questions about how they sign up, how they get on a list to be able to get the vaccination sometime in the future.
So to my knowledge, and I might turn this over to Dr. German a little bit too, because he's on the medical provider side, but I don't know of any providers that are really taking lists yet because they don't know the true rollout. They don't know when they'll actually have allocations available for certain groups. So to my knowledge, isn't that ability yet. For those within the phase 1A, groups 1 through 4 that qualify within those groups, they could possibly go down to the fairgrounds and receive one there. There's possible opportunities expanding into the pharmacies and things like that, as well as their primary physicians. But Dr. German, do you happen to know a little bit more about that as well?
I think it's a bit premature, as you mentioned. Right now, that is the challenge we find ourselves across the nation and locally in the state of Oregon and in our respective counties, is that it's ill-defined right now, the allocation and the quantities that our respective states are getting, and that has been the challenge that Oregon Health Authority has had in able to give good information as far as when those will be. And then the development of multiple of these vaccination committees to evaluate, how best to ration, essentially, these allotments and at what time we're going to receive them. And so, the question remains as far as how we're going to be able to ramp up production of these as well. And so I think it's an unsettling time for community members and everybody across the country and world, in fact, for knowing what time we're going to get those. I think really just what we have right now is what OHA is saying for our groups 1 through 4 in phase 1A is what they're able to dictate at this time. And so it really is, it seems to appear to be us getting through that first group, and then OHA, when they know that there's a consistent allocation of that. And Patrick Allen, director of OHA, has said that there probably is going to be a little bit more consistent flow. And so we're thinking that there would be 85,000 doses given to Oregon on a weekly basis. That's a ballpark assessment, but that remains to be seen from the federal allocation. So I don't know if that totally answers the question, but as far as people being able to sign up in times, the state is not entirely clear. And I think that then hence poses a challenge for our clinics and for our hospital systems and for the sites that we're going to be vaccinating. So I think it's, we still have a lot of information to come, but I suspect in the coming month or so, we will have more information surrounding that.
Thank you.
Well, Jesse, can I just jump in? I think there was a lot of comments that it might be a good segue here. As far as, Jesse asked me just to come and speak about vaccines in general, I think. So first off, my name is Tony German. I am a family doctor. I'm clinical medical director at Salud Medical Clinic and at Pacific Pediatrics, where we see about 16,000 people in the greater Woodburn area and surrounding communities. I've practiced there about 9 years now. I also have a background in health policy, and I serve on the governor's medical advisory panel for the COVID response. It's just helping for giving guidance for the governor and some of her decision making regarding the COVID response. So I think really, the question that Jesse had me is just to speak in general about vaccines. And so we find ourselves in a really tremendous time period. And I think this is something very, very exciting to talk about. So I appreciate this opportunity to speak with council members and Mayor Swenson about this. So hopefully there's a lot to say. And I think I want to save a lot of time for questions, but briefly getting into where we're at in a background, we have 2 vaccines that are approved by emergency use authorization. And so those are the Mrna vaccine and the Pfizer and BioNTech vaccines. The platforms that those are based off of are called mRNA vaccine technology. And what you've heard is that this is a new technology. It is something that we've never formally used on a large population base for delivery of a vaccine. However, I want to be clear to everybody that this research has been going on for decades. It is nothing new. In fact, we've been working since 2005 on fine-tuning mRNA injections to make sure that they're appropriate, and we've used them in the settings of flu, rabies, Zika virus, and treatment of certain cancers. And in fact, that's where a lot of research surrounded mRNA use was in cancer research. So in 2003, the original SARS corona outbreak, we were able to identify the spike protein. You probably read a little bit on that in the news and media. Strain. That is the area that we are targeting with this vaccine. So it's basically the spot with which this vaccine gives our bodies the ability to recognize it. And I think stepping back even further is, what is a vaccine? A vaccine is basically information that allows our bodies to recognize a foreign substance in our bodies. And I like to give the analogy for my patients that when we give vaccines, what we're kind of doing is giving a photocopy, right? Most vaccines, in fact, pretty much all vaccines are copies of a piece of a foreign body, and most typically those are viral particles. And so in this mRNA, I like to give the analogy, this is like a Post-it note. So an mRNA is a piece of information, it's a protein that we are giving to our bodies that does not last very long. It's very short-lived. It was only in our bodies for a couple hours, and then it quickly degrades and breaks down. So it's a very different way of giving information to our bodies. So for the younger generations, it's kind of like Snapchat, right? So you take a photo and it's there for a little bit, and then it's gone. So I think that's really important for people to think about, because there's a lot of myths around here, and us giving good information to the general public is really important. So in January 2020, the National Institute of Health was working with Mrna, and they were using an mRNA platform on a different virus called the Nipah virus. It had already been developed, but then came along on the 11th, actually today, of January 2020, exactly a year ago, scientists discovered that SARS-CoV-2 in Wuhan was happening. And what they did is they took out the viral particles of the Nipah virus, and they simply replaced it with the spike protein Post-it note or Snapchat, right? And they put it into that. And so that's how we arrived at this moment so quickly and so innovatively and creatively to arrive where we're at right now. So again, I think some other pointers to think about, the process by which we've achieved going through a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, these are all standard protocols. We have not fast forward passing, we have not taken any shortcuts to arrive at providing safety for these vaccines. Some other backgrounds, I think, is that an mRNA vaccine does not contain any live, meaning it's not the virus particle itself. It doesn't contain a weakened virus, where sometimes we take the virus, but we take a piece of it, or we break it up. It's not an inactivated virus. It's not a dead virus. It is simply the protein structure that we can allow our bodies to figure out. As I mentioned, the mRNA vaccine degrades very quickly. You think of it as just kind of, again, a recipe on a Post-it note that we give in our arm and our muscles, and then it slowly is broken down. There's some questions and myths as far as, does this mRNA, is it going to go into our DNA, and will it change who we are? And so this mRNA does not go into the nucleus, because mRNA by nature never enters the nucleus of our cells, so it never interact with our DNA. As far as safety is something to think about, is what's in this vaccine. And so really what it is it's some proteins, it has some fat, it has sugar and salts. And basically that protein is surrounded basically by a little bubble. Like, think of it as basically, in order to get in the cell, think of it as tiny little butter droplets, okay? And so we just take, that's the way that we can fuse it into some of our cells, so that we can start to make that protein structure. I won't go into some of the other crazy myths, but we can talk about it if some of those there, but there's a lot out there. Now, where we arrived with phase 3 trials, both Mrna and the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccines really demonstrate some really remarkable findings of efficacy of 90 to 95%, and that's after 2 doses. And just as Jesse shared, the Pfizer-BioNTech is a 2-shot regimen that's after 21 days, 17, 21 days. and the Mrna is after 28 days, and so 2 shots. Now, there is something to think about that with these being different, we are discovering and learning a little bit more. There are some side effects that can be with this. However, they are related mainly to our immune system building up immunity. That's what we want to do. We want to push our immune system so that it can recognize those foreign particles that come into here. So there is a larger increase of side effects such as body aches, local pain at the site of injection. There can be fevers and chills that can be associated with it, and there also can be fatigue. I will share with you that I had my 2nd dose yesterday morning, and last night I did have some chills and a bit of a fever. It was short-lived, and actually I welcomed that in that knowing that I got something legitimate in my arm. I know that I got actually something that's going to help protect me. And so I have seen a number of my colleagues that have had some similar. Now, you know, by far and away, the majority of people, over 50%, won't feel much at all other than a sore arm, but some people might experience some of those. We have had some severe allergic reactions, and so those are related to anaphylactic reactions. Now, this is on the order of 1 in 190,000, so a very, 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 very rare event. And so the out of the 21 cases that have been in the United States, out of several million doses given now, essentially 19 of those have been in individuals that have had a severe anaphylactic reaction in the past. And so there are some precautions that you're sharing with people. There is some, Sharon, that, you know, some questions about other really worrisome features like Bell's palsy you may have read about. That really has not demonstrated, if you were to take just a general public of 2 million people, you're going to have some Bell palsy cases in that. And so the difference between those has not really demonstrated that there is a differentiation between a vaccinated population and unvaccinated population. You know, I do want to end just saying that despite us having these vaccines that are highly efficacious and in my mind, very safe, we for the next year are still going to need to mask. We're still going to need to wash our hands. We're still going to need to maintain distancing. And the distinction is because 95% effective is not 100% effective. There's still a 5% chance that somebody, despite having a vaccine, might contract, particularly when we have such a high prevalence in the general community right now. The other thing is a distinction I'd like to make is that we know vaccines prevent disease, but can they fully prevent infection? So somebody may actually contract COVID-2, but still not demonstrate symptoms. They may not have, they may be somebody that still remains asymptomatic and they can fight it off, but they might still pass this on. There is a lot of evidence and a lot of growing research that is looking to answer this question. But from a community standpoint, we need to maintain that we do not have those studies as of yet. And so we still need to offer protection for our community members that still might be at risk, especially for those that still can't get the vaccine, particularly those are children that have not had studies yet. And so that's another area of research that we still are looking for. Those studies are beginning, and so we should, in the coming months, 6 months or so, hopefully have some more information surrounding are children safe to receive the vaccine. I'd like to end just saying that if you haven't gotten your flu shot already, you definitely should. I want to make sure that nobody has a vaccine 14 days prior to getting the COVID vaccine. So I'll end it there, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Doc, hi, Scott Derrickson. I got a quick question for you. I've been asked this a couple times. Is 95%, how does that compare to other vaccines, like maybe flu or polio or something like that? Something people know about.
Excellent question. So this actually beats most vaccines. This is a really remarkable finding. And I think when we were, you probably may have heard, you know, Dr. Fauci talking about that if we had reached a efficacy of 60% for this vaccine, we would have been quite impressed. So the efficacy of this new platform, mRNA, is really, really remarkable. Our flu vaccine actually usually on most cases is given And the problem with flu vaccine is that it's a different virus and that it changes quite readily, right? And it's constantly mutating. And as you guys have read in the news, that this virus itself has had some changes, right? This virus does not change as quickly as a flu vaccine. So that vaccine sometimes could be on the order of 50 to 60% effective for influenza. So it's a very good question.
What about the rate of, so you asked about the rate of how the vaccine works for this particular virus, but what about comparatively, like how many folks have contracted COVID versus how many folks contract a regular flu during a general flu season? Like, how do the numbers compare, Dr. German?
Well, yeah, it's very good. I don't think we have the exact numbers as far as, what I can tell you is mortality data that's pretty clear. So on the order, usually in an annual year across the United States, anywhere from 40 to 60,000 people will die from an influenza virus. We are now at 370,000 who have died and lost their lives to COVID-19 over the course of the 10 months that we've had. So this is a much more worrisome virus. So total, and this interesting part is that all these interventions this year has been remarkable because we really have not had a flu season as of yet, and we're really crossing our fingers that will remain the case, because if we have a double burden of having influenza season on top of this, that would be really, a terrible scenario to find ourselves.
One quick follow-up to Councilor Carney's first question. I understand that we're in the beginning stages of immunization, and so expecting that people can just start and getting on a list and that kind of thing, that's probably an unreasonable expectation. I think more the question is, in my mind, when it is more readily available, how will our general Woodburn public, for instance, find out that now is a good time to start? Like, what will be the avenue of communication for that? I think that's the greater informative piece that would help us.
And I'm more than happy to take that question, at least from the city's staff perspective. There's going to be a large amount of information coming out in general news as phases roll out, obviously, but it'll definitely be a prior. We have kind of added the, or if not, we should have today. Tommy and I were working on adding OHA's distribution kind of model to our website, so people have a place to refer, as well as when new phases are issued, we'll put them in our platforms. Granted, we don't have the largest reach. We have a decent, following on Facebook and things like that. And then obviously, we will talk about these on the different radio stations, the Russian, Slavic, and the Spanish radio stations we have touch points with regularly. And Dr. German is a godsend when it comes to those as well. He supports us way more than I think anyone should. So he's an asset to our community by far. But from the city's perspective, I can speak to that point. And then as I think, we'll try to target some of that messaging. If it's really easy to send information over to the states and get that information out once it's available. Send that over to Dawn at the states, and she'll get that out in a hot minute. So there are channels within our community partnerships as well, and even the chamber. There's several. Once the kind of larger rollout happens, I think sharing it across multiple platforms, because throughout this whole thing, as we talked about last time I was on screen, is how many touch points and where can we do it, and just trying to hit as many as we can, whether it's in the mail or whatever. Our goal is to just find out whatever the easiest way to share that information is, and we'll do our best. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think just to add on that, just, Oregon Health Authority is really doing an excellent job, I think, with communication. But like as Jesse said, I can't encourage this body in thinking about that messaging of speaking to safety and efficacy. We know in research and studies that adoption rates are pretty challenging, on the order of 50 to 60%, particularly in the Latino community and in those communities of minorities as well. In general, the adoption rate is challenged because of historical, points of where we've tripped and fallen on that messaging. But as best we can to share that. The other challenge I would say is, Mr. Carney's point is that we don't want to put the cart in front of the horse, and so a lot of people are going to be asking for these vaccines. So at Salud, we are getting flooded with a ton of phone calls regarding this, and so that unfortunately takes my staff away from delivering care. And so it's a hard, I think, maneuver. I think as we move forward, it will be a concert effort, from all orchestra players as far as doing that messaging when we can. And so that will come from our clinics, from our health systems, but also OHA and from this body as well.
That's extremely helpful. Thank you. That was my concern, is that how we can work cooperatively as a city and as a staff to make sure that we are part of that funnel so that the information gets out and doesn't form a logjam at the local clinics and those kinds of things. I appreciate the information. Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. German or for Jesse? Let me just say, I love the pivot that Jesse made. I saw that as he was presenting to a few different groups from testing to vaccinations, and so he got up to speed and went from 0 to 60 in whatever 10 seconds, and is really all over all these details. So thanks, Jesse, for that. And Dr. German. Yeah. Pleasure to have you with us.
Do you mind? One more thing actually around testing, because as Dr. German said, we're still going to have to practice our safety practices through this, and testing will still be important throughout this process as well, because not everyone is going to be vaccinated tomorrow, as we've learned. And so there are 4 upcoming events that are going to be held directly in Woodburn that OHA is hosting, January 16th, January 30th, February 13th and February 27th, all at Centennial Park from 10 to 2. And those you can sign up online. Tommy has posted that information, and we'll get that out on our multiple platforms, as well as it'll be shared in other platforms as well, just so folks know.
All right, thanks.
Well, Mayor Swenson, thank you for having me. Just an offer to the group. If you guys have any further questions, feel free to email me. It's just my first name and my last initial, Antonio G at YVFWC. I know it's kind of funny, Yakima Valley Farm Workers Clinic.org. It's a mouthful, so it's just the first initials.
Great, thanks for joining us again, Dr. German. Okay, so now we shall move to the consent agenda. And may I have our city recorder please read the items?
The items on the consent agenda are as follows. Woodburn City Council minutes of December 14th, 2020. December 29th, 2020 public hearing minutes on 2020 Community Development Block Grant from Business Oregon. Intergovernmental agreement, participation and support of an application for CDBG COVID-19 funding for rental assistance, crime statistics through November 2020, and building activity for December 2020.
This is the point where if anyone has any questions about any of the items, you can ask them now, or if you think we should take a vote on an item, you may remove it from the agenda as well.
It looks like we have no comment. Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as designed.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the motion carries. Okay, our next item is under general business is Council Bill 3141.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to introduce Council Bill number 3141.
I'm going to read the.
Oh, okay, I'll do that. I was going to leave it up to Heather.
can-
Resolution settling amount of the Parks and Recreation System development charges under an existing methodology, i.e. establishing an alternative rate review fee and setting an effective date for imposition of the fees and charges.
All right, Council Bill number 3141 has been duly introduced, and it is a resolution, and as such requires one reading. And may we please have the reading by the title only if there's no objection.
Council Bill number 3141, resolution setting amount of the Parks and Recreation Systems development charges under an existing methodology, establishing an alternative rate review fee, and setting an effective date for imposition of the fees and charges.
All right, and I see Jim's camera's on, so we have a staff report. Thanks,
Yeah,
Jim.
thank you. Yeah, Mr. Or members of the council, Jim Mrna, Assistant City Administrator. This is actually a pretty routine item for us. This is one that for members that have been on the council for a while, you're probably used to seeing every year. It's essentially an inflationary adjustment to the Parks System Development Charges, or SDC fees, that we charge to new developments. And just a little bit of an update on just kind of SDCs in general, because they're things that we talk about periodically. They're a significant funding source for the city when it comes to a lot of our infrastructure systems like parks, streets, water, wastewater, and stormwater systems. And the idea behind them is that as development occurs in the city and you have more businesses and more residents moving into the city, those additional people and those additional structures put demands on those infrastructure systems that didn't exist before. And probably a really good, well, for parks, for example, if we have to the city, we don't have enough parks and park amenities in the city currently to be able to accommodate the demand that those new residents are going to bring. And so system development charges are authorized by state law. They've been around for more than 30 years. The city of Woodburn has actually been collecting system development charges for almost 30 years itself. Kind of the main concept behind it is that system development charges can only be used to fund projects that add capacity to the system that they apply to. So in the case of park system development charges, you can use those to buy parkland for future park development. You can actually build new parks with it, or you can build facilities within existing parks. So if you have a park that's maybe underdeveloped and you wanted to add a trail system, a picnic shelter, basketball courts, tennis courts, those would be allowable uses of system development charges. What you can't do with SDC fees is you can't use them to pay for non-capacity adding items such as maintenance or operations. So they have to be strictly for capacity adding projects. And even going beyond that, in order to be able to assess system development charges, a local jurisdiction has to create a methodology and adopt that methodology into their own ordinance structure, which Woodburn has done. We last updated our methodology in 2016. And primarily what that methodology does is it takes a look at the potential future growth or the planned future growth that the community expects to experience, usually over a planning horizon like 10 years. We identify all of the projects, in this case, park projects that are likely to be needed in order to accommodate the demand that that new development is going to bring to the community. And there's a complex analysis that's done that identifies how much of the growth that needs to occur can and should be attributed to the impact from that new development. And it lays out an appropriate and legal amount of SDC fees that can be used for each of those projects. So we have a number of different projects on the capital improvement project list that was adopted as a part of the methodology update, which is required. Things from turf soccer fields to even the community center is eligible for a small portion of SDC fees. And then also the construction of future greenway trail projects, even parkland acquisition and development for parks that don't currently exist in the city, as it's expected that the city is going to continue to expand, even geographically, into areas where we would eventually end up being parkland deficient. So SDCs are a critical financing tool for our significant infrastructure systems. It's important for us to stay on top of these and to periodically update our capital improvement project list and to periodically update our methodology. I would usually say that's done typically with an update to a significant comprehensive plan. So we have a Parks and Recreation master plan that identified future growth, future projects that are likely needed, and then an SDC methodology usually follows that to do a more detailed analysis of kind of the numbers behind it. How many people do we expect to move into town? What sort of projects do we need? How much do we expect them to cost? And how much of that expense is really eligible for park system development charge revenue? So, so that's kind of a really complex explanation of what SDCs are in general. The item before you tonight is really one of the rare opportunities that we actually have to increase those fees without going through a full-blown methodology update, but it's limited strictly to the increase in construction costs that have happened over the past year. So this is something where we look at the prior calendar year, in this case 2020. We just received those updated construction costs, which in this case amounted to 6% annually. And so we are proposing a 6% increase in our park SDC fees to be effective February 1. The primary driver is residential development when it comes to parks, and that makes sense because when you add new houses, you bring new people that live in the community and they use parks a lot. There's also a small non-residential fee for commercial and industrial development, with the concept being that a new business comes to town, they add 10 employees, those employees will use parks, but not nearly to the degree that somebody who lives in town uses. So the non-residential fee is relatively small. In this particular case, we are recommending that the residential fee be increased from $3,707 per new dwelling unit to $3,929 per dwelling unit. And then just for a point of reference, our the amount of SDCs as confirmed by the audit that was presented to you at the last meeting, at the beginning or at the end of last fiscal year or the beginning of this current fiscal year, was $713,000 and change. So it's a somewhat healthy balance. We are hopeful, as we have been for many years, that we're actually likely to see a significant amount of residential development. It's been a little slow to actually get built, but I think over the next few years, we should see the health of our park SDC fund increase. Those fees alone are not enough to accomplish all of the projects that we have in our capital improvement plan, and they never are. And so we rely very heavily on outside sources of funding as well, you know, in particular grant programs that are targeted towards public park projects. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Questions for Jim?
I have maybe a question or more of a comment. I think, so example, like Legion Park. So that was, those are 3 phases to that. I know I remember seeing something about Legion Park a while ago, and I'm not sure, I think I remember seeing, was it 3 phases? So is that SDC's part of that for the future for Legion, or where is that timeline, I guess, or what does that look like?
Well, great question. And I think that the use of SDC fees for Legion Park improvements is extremely likely. We're planning on those being a significant funding source for those projects. The most recent significant project that we completed at Legion Park included that the new picnic shelter and then the pathway system that was constructed there. I think we received a grant for about $200,000, so that funded a significant portion of that project. But I believe we relied on park SDC fees for the remainder, which was, you know, many hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's very typical. We do have a plan for Legion Park that calls for further improvements, including the removal of the stadium and the existing natural turf soccer field to be replaced by an artificial turf field with a more modern park lighting system and an expanded pedestrian pathway system. It's a very expensive project. In fact, the last we looked, when the high school completed their natural turf field about a year and a half ago, we worked closely with their contractor there to get kind of a rough estimate of what a project like that would cost us. And at the time it was north of $2 million. And I'm guessing that those costs haven't come down any since then. So we could be looking at a $2.5 million project roughly to complete the artificial turf field, which is, it's been a community priority for ours for quite a while. It's a project that we would like to see done. Eventually we'll be in a position to do it. We thought we might be in that position sooner than we are, but we hope to get there soon.
Thank you.
Other questions for Jim?
Jim, I have a question about the actual collection of those fees. So you use the Smith project as an example of where those fees would come from. But at what point in the game are those remitted? Like, how does that, is it on their, when they're applying to actually put the development in? Like, where do those funds actually get collected?
That's another excellent question. So their development approval came well over a year ago. I think it's probably closer to 2 years now. So those fees aren't collected then. The fees are actually collected after a home builder submits their plans for a new building, and they have to pay those upon issuance of that building permit. So they get paid at the time every single individual residential unit is constructed. So with a single family home, when a permit is issued for home number one, they have to pay those fees at that time. So the SDC fees tend to come a little bit later in the game. They don't come upon the approval of the overall land use development. They come when those building permits are issued. Further complicated for, just one quick add on Smith. And this is something that happens pretty frequently, and it's identified in statute and also in the city's ordinance, is that we have a provision for allowing the developer to build some of the park improvement projects that are in our approved capital improvement plan on our behalf. And if they do that, we approve that in advance, then we will grant them credits upon the SDC they would ordinarily pay. And that applies in the Smith Creek development. They built a significant stretch of Greenway Trail on city property, and then they built a park plaza with a picnic shelter and a restroom building. And both of those were park improvements that were over and above those that they were already required to build through their land use development. We thought it was important for those to be in place when the development was constructed. And typically a private developer can build those at a lower cost than the public sector can for a variety of reasons. And so in some cases, this one in particular, it made sense for us to grant them credits for some of the SDCs that they were going to pay if they built those improvements for us.
That's very helpful. So it allows the developer to more incrementally absorb those costs.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
But what that means is that for the first, in this particular case, the first phase of development that's under construction in Smith Creek includes about 150 homes. We haven't arrived on those precise costs just yet because we're working through that whole process, but most of the park SDC fees that they would have been paying on those 150 homes will be credited back to them. So we won't actually net very many for the first phase, but we don't, at this point, we haven't approved any other projects that that development would complete on our behalf that would be park SDC eligible. That may happen if we find a project here or there that makes sense for them to continue adding, but I don't anticipate that to be very significant. So most of the rest of that development will be paying park SDC fees.
On those fees that are issued credits, they're basically taking the burden off contracting to get those amenities put in anyway, right? It's a nice trade-off.
It really is, because they'd be paying the fees to us, and then we would turn around and then, hire contractors to complete that development. And a lot of times It's much more efficient for those improvements to be made at the exact same time that everything else is being built. It's much more efficient. You've got your excavators in there, you're laying rock, streets. It makes sense to build those pathways at the same time that you're building streets. And that's one of the reasons that it makes it a cost-effective approach for us, as opposed to us doing it later, which could end up being years later. And then we have homes built, residents living there, and then these unbuilt parklands for a while. So there are times where it makes a lot of sense to do this.
Thank you. That's super helpful, Jim.
Other questions for Jim? Jim, could you speak to the, we're going from 3,700 to about 3,900 per dwelling unit. And so maybe speak to the timeline with our apartments coming in. When does it look like we'll be issuing the permits to those two complexes?
Well, that's probably a better question for Chris, but I would think that they would be hard pressed to submit for and receive their building permits by February 1st, which is just a couple of weeks away. So even within the first phase, which is single family for Smith Creek, they've already been issued a number of building permits, so the current fee applies to those. But for all of those building permits that are going to be issued after the new February 1st effective date, those are going to be applied at the higher rate. So I strongly suspect that all of the multifamily apartments that are going to be coming into Smith, that would, the new increased rate would most certainly apply.
And Chris, do you have a sense of when we'll be issuing building permits to those apartment complexes?
You're probably talking more generally. The city's approved some. I'm sorry, I'm Chris Kerr, the Community Development Director. Mr. Mayor, I think you're probably referring to the general uptick we've seen in multifamily. In fact, we have some apartments on 99 that are, I want to say it's 204 multifamily units. Those, as an example, Jim was walking you through in a lot of detail as to how SDC credits work and when fees are due, et cetera. I'm expecting the building permits for that project to get picked up, frankly, this week, according to the owner. So it's quite likely that they're going to come in, pay those fees right now for an example, that apartment complex on 99, that's 204 units. Do that math for that times 3,800, whatever Jim's number is, just for parks. And of course, they have to pay all their SDCs at that time too. And that's ballpark, it's about $18,000 or so for a multifamily unit, somewhere in that area, maybe $20,000. So the vast majority of the multifamily apartments will be coming in after February 1st, but I think that first batch of 200 along 99 should come in before that.
Okay, so that'd be 200 times the 3,700.
And that's just for parks SDCs. That doesn't include all the other SDCs, which of course are for storm, sewer, water, streets.
Gotcha. Okay. And then how about what's the timeline for the apartments that we just approved on the 600 on Walmart with?
Those are the ones on Stacy Allison that they're proposing in 2 phases. We've had discussions with them, but there's still a lot of work to do. In terms of the development process, when those permits and buildings would come in, we're many months from that happening. They would still have to go through their full public works review to look at all the specifics on engineering, water, sewer, et cetera. That's their next step.
But are they kind of on track for this year, 2021? They want to?
Well, they say that they are. It's a big project.
Yeah, we'll see.
I believe it when I see it.
A good general chance. All righty. Anything else?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve
Point
the,
of order. This requires a roll call vote.
Okay.
have we exhausted the questions?
All righty. Okay, let's have a roll call vote. Heather?
Counselor Cornwell,
Yes.
Counselor Schaub,
Yes.
Counselor Puente,
Yes.
Counselor Cabrales,
Yes.
Counselor Carney,
Yes.
Counselor Swanson,
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Okay, next we have an award contract for engineering services for water supply system risk and resilience assessment, which requires a motion and a second. Do we have a staff report with that first, Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, we do. Our engineer is Eric Loquist is here. I see he just popped up on the screen.
Hi. Good evening, Mayor and City Councilor. I'm Eric Lillquist, the Public Works Projects and Engineering Director. And if you could bear with me just a little bit, this is the first time I've had to do this COVID type of presentation. See if I can get that up on the screen for you. What I'd like to do is, as an extended staff report, go over the water system, do a brief overview of the city water system, and to be able to get you an idea kind of also what this risk and resilience, the assessment is about. So let me go to slideshow from beginning. Can everybody see that okay? Is there something else I need to do to present that? Does it show up all right to everybody?
That's good.
Okay, outstanding. All right, I'm going to go ahead then with the presentation. So on this first slide, you can see it shows the major elements of the city water system. And just to note there, you see the elevated water tank to the left, which provides system-wide service pressure between roughly 53 and 55 pounds per square inch throughout the city water distribution system. Next slide, just kind of a brief slide showing the overall service area for the Woodburn water system. And we have here is the water consumption by customer type. This gives you an idea how water is distributed throughout the city. And you can see that the residential water consumption is by far the largest component. And at any time, if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me. Next, moving on to the water supply system. So the water supply system is comprised of three main components. First is the source, which includes 7 active underground wells. We have 2 wells feeding each treatment plant and an emergency well on the west side of the freeway. For treatment, we have 3 water treatment plants within the city, which remove iron and manganese and also provide system-wide disinfection, which we will go over in more detail on the next slide. The third component is storage and pumping. So we have 3 ground level reservoirs throughout the city, 1 at each of the water treatment plants, and then 1 elevated water tower. All right, apologize for all the wordiness of this. I tried to condense it, believe me. But anyhow, so suffice to say, the water treatment plants were online since October of 2005 when that entire project was constructed. And the treatment plants have provided a significant mitigation of taste, odor, and staining problems that were pervasive in the system prior to the implementation of the water treatment plants. And the potassium permanganate oxidization process, along with the pressure green sand filters and aeration, aid in the removal of iron, manganese, arsenic, radon gas, and hydrogen sulfide. Now, in May of 2011, and I was here during this time, we had hypochlorination equipment purchased. So now the city can produce their own sodium hypochlorite in-house. And what sodium hypochlorite is, it's really the primary disinfection for the water distribution system. And what we have kind of unique in our aquifer, we have naturally occurring ammonia, and the chlorine interacts with this to produce chloramines, which is an excellent secondary disinfectant agent, which provides long-lasting disinfection throughout the entire water distribution system. It's kind of interesting. That's the reason why we've chosen the disinfection process that we have for the city. And to give you a little bit of just details of the city system, city has roughly 5.5 million gallons of water storage capacity. And the treatment plants are equipped with standby generators to ensure supply and production in emergency situations. And the city staff not only maintains and operates the water treatment plants, but they also have to maintain 7 wells, over 100 miles of water mains, 1,015 fire hydrants, over 2,900 valves, and over 7,000 water meter services. Now getting to this kind of the more in line with the staff report. And in summary here, the risk and resiliency assessment that's required is a comprehensive all hazard physical and cyber security risk and resiliency assessment for all city water assets. And per the, what is it called? It's US Code 42, and I can't remember the subsection, but to maintain compliance with Section 2013 of America's Water Infrastructure Act of 2018, we must complete this process and certify this assessment. And the assessment will examine city water supply system assets and develop a prioritized program for risk and resiliency management. A contract amendment will need to be executed approximately next summer for the development of an emergency response plan, which is also required under the same US code. And kind of finally, for some dates and deadlines, this risk assessment must be certified no later than June 30th, 2021, and the emergency response plan must be certified by December 30th of 2021. And in consultation with the consultant, they see no problem in allowing us to be able to achieve those timelines. And the last slide here, I took this verbatim out of the US code, and I'm going to bore you and just go ahead and kind of read it through here. So the assessment includes the following analyses: the risk to the system from malevolent acts and natural hazards, the resilience of the pipes and constructed conveyances, physical barriers, source water, water collection and intake, pre-treatment, treatment, storage and distribution facilities, electronic, computer, and other automated systems. Also, the monitoring practices of the system, the financial infrastructure of the system, the use, storage, and handling of the chemicals in the system, and of course, the operation and maintenance of the system. And that's kind of just a kind of brief overview of the city system and of this required risk and resiliency assessment, and as well as the emergency response plan. But I'd be glad to take any questions that you may have.
All right, questions for Eric? That was such a well-done presentation. You left no room for questions.
I'm going to stop sharing here if I can with my computer. Let me know if that works. There we go. I can be taught. Look at this, everybody.
Well, as all of us have heard, our city administrator often talking about the most important thing we do is this, right? Having water, taking water away from homes, making sure our water is safe. It's what cities do that allows civilization to take place. So, way to keep civilization going, Mr. Lillquist.
Two thumbs way up.
Very good. Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we award the contract for engineering services for a water supply system risk and resiliency assessment to Murray Smith Incorporated. The award
Oh, sorry.
for an amount of $75,007 and authorize the city administrator to sign the agreement.
I second it.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Okay, with just those two items of the agenda, our next is under other business. And I was able to talk to most of you about this, as well as put that in an email earlier this week, is taking just like a first step to get to know each other. We're a new council without the benefit right now of, normally this time we'd be calling a date for a retreat and we'd hang out at, some retreat place within the city limits and go through that process, get to know each other and set council goals. But I've been talking a lot with the city administrator about this process and slowing it down a little bit just because we're in a unique situation. But I thought it'd be important for those two items to get to know each other a little bit and to share just a couple things, like share, some of your whys, share your, here's my purpose or my priorities as a person, right? From the different walks of life we all come through, and kind of mixed in with the reason that we run for city council, and some priorities that are important to you for our city. This would not be, talking about specific goals. Like I think the city should do X, Y, or Z with its SDCs, for example, but kind of just some general guidelines. And I think the way this process will work out is that we meet every week, Council President Carney, myself, and the city administrator and our city attorney. So we'll kind of process this, and then the next ask to you is the ways you'd like us to proceed as we move towards setting our priorities, which is really, as you all went through the LOC training, some of us recently went through it again, like that's the one thing we do. We set priorities for the city, we set goals, the city administrator then sets specific goals, and like that's our thing. That's the one main thing we do. So we'll just go around, and I think we'll just share like one by one. So like I won't have like Allie share all 5 of hers, and then she'll take them all. Like other people just saying me too. So we'll just we'll start with Councilor Schaub, if you don't mind, and just give a little bit about yourself, why you ran for city council, and what some of your like general priorities that you are think important for our city.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I first was approached about running for city council, I happened to be working at the Woodburn Senior Estates, and I thought it would be just a wonderful idea to kind of integrate the senior community in with the city of Woodburn, because they seemed like they were 2 separate entities. And knowing that there's 1,508 homes in this community, I just thought it would be advantageous to both parties if we could come together. That was my goal. Since that time, I just realized how important it is for an individual such as myself, a senior citizen, to be involved with the city. And it has opened up so many opportunities to become involved with the various groups, Love Santa, Love Inc., many other, Fiesta, I mean, all of it. Anyway, that's where I was at, and that's what I'll continue to do is work to integrate seniors in with our younger generation. I'm not sure. As far as goals, to be quite honest right now, with everything that's happened in this country, besides COVID, I would prefer to put off any goal setting until, say, after the first quarter, because I have no idea what the financial impact on the city is going to be. So that's kind of where I'm at. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Deb. Councilor Cornwell.
Hi, let me put my camera on. Here we are. I was afraid you were going to come to me next. It's a nice job. I'd like to call myself a senior citizen to some degree as well, but in another time, not quite yet there, but I was proudly encouraged and boldly encouraged to join because mainly Frank Lonergan was running for mayor and no one else stepped up to take. And I have known Frank all my life and felt that the downtown area needed a strong leadership voice to continue going forward. Like Sharon said, I wanted the town to have unity. I wanted to have a voice. I wanted to see that culturally we could all be brought together. I wanted downtown to be more respected, more time taken on it, cleaned up, all those good things that are still occurring. And since I've lived here all my life, I wanted to carry on the legacy that I felt like my parents and family left before me. And it wasn't a scary thing to do. It seemed like the right thing to do, to join and try and be on council. And I feel like I've learned so much about the city and I'm proud, and my family calls and says they're really happy that I'm on it and representing and going forward from the Black Lives Matter March. That's probably what they're most proud of, that I took part in that, and to just cleaning up downtown and getting things changed. There's a lot of things going forward that Ward 5 has to consider, including the Smith Creek addition to the Hay Street addition and changes there, to the continued downtown, to the COVID, to the schools, just so many things. Sharon, I agree with you that maybe we shouldn't be setting big time goals for us as a group, but there is something that just keeps coming to the forefront for me. And Chris and different people that are in charge of the city say it's not the city's responsibility and we don't have the money to do it. But I'm really concerned about the sidewalks in the heart of the downtown area, from perhaps Settlemyre to Front Street and say Cleveland all the way to Harrison. Last night I was down on my hands and knees from tripping in the dark, and it's just like I've had enough of it. And I know if I'm agile enough and tripping, lots of people are out there tripping. And again, hopefully there's some sort of program that we could put forward to help people repair, make the sidewalks downtown safer. I know it's a huge money drag, but it's really something that is of concern to a lot of us down here for walking and just for safety purposes. But anyway, I'm happy to be on the council. I really enjoy working with Sharon and Rob and all the other people Debbie, everyone that's on the council, and I look forward to working more with Ben. We've known each other for several years as well, and Allie and Scott. You guys are just fabulous. You're my family right now, and I actually look forward to these meetings because I do have to restrict myself so much to be home. And fortunately, I'm an introvert, so it works pretty well. But at the same time, my empathic self needs to reach out and try and help other people. And when you're kind of closed at home, it's limiting factors. Doesn't always emotionally work too well for me. But that's my hope for the future, and to continue on with the goals that we set 2 years ago. We've met some, but there's still some kind of out there waiting for us to pursue. And I think we should just continue with those as well. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mary Beth. Okay, Councilor Cabrales.
Hi, everyone. I agree with Councilor Schwab and Councilor Cornwell. But I also think one of the reasons why I decided to run, or why I even decided to be on city council, is because I wanted to be, I know that we talk about being inclusive and working towards that, but I feel like we still as a city have a long ways to go. And so when I was approached about running or being on the city council, I realized that there was nobody on there that looked like me or represented my background. And so that's the reason why I stepped up and I decided that it was time for if no one else was going to make a change, like that I should step up and make the change, be the change. We still have a long ways to go. But with that being inclusive, that also means like, I know we have Maricela, who is a translator who is able to translate, but I think that we should have a paid translator on all the meetings that's available at any time. And that's not just for Spanish speaking, but any other language that we have or that is needed. And then I don't know how I feel about about having a retreat. I know that we have to set goals, and I know that it's very important for us as a city to be able to do that. And so I mean, it's to be determined, right? Because of COVID and everything that's going on. But I really would like to see a BIPOC-led retreat. And I think it's very important for us, if we wanted to be inclusive, we should definitely bring someone out that isn't a white male to kind of teach us how to be more inclusive, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'll give it back to the mayor. You're muted.
Sorry, I was typing your answer, so I was like, not wanting to hear you have my clicks. So Councilor Swanson.
Well, I'm happy to be able to follow Debbie, because one of the reasons that I decided to pursue city council and am happy to be serving in this capacity is also because of equity. I have always been a firm believer that we are the government, and that if you want to get something done, you get in a position where you can affect change for those people who you care about. I personally care about my friends and neighbors that are represented in Ward 2. And so my heart of hearts is to make sure that we have a safe, healthy community. In order to do that, we have to make sure that regardless of the language people speak or their socioeconomic backgrounds, whatever their station in life is, that we have a means to accessing goods and services and a healthy life for everyone. Not in a Pollyanna kind of way, but in a way that we look like a model of a community that takes care of our citizens. So that's where I come from and what I'm excited to help. I'd like to leave a legacy of Woodburn as a community where everyone can thrive. That's a great goal of my personal. On a platform for looking at goals for this council, I think that the city does a great job on a lot of communications, are very clear and concise. As far as connectivity, as a business person, I know that COVID has really caused me some very significant barriers to be thrown up. As far as how am I, 99.9% of my business pre-COVID was face-to-face. That's how I was effective. That's how I did business. So I would like to talk more about in future sessions where we're meeting as a body, talk about how has the city been affected in their day-to-day? Because I know that on a personal level, I also deal with very closely with Love in the Name of Christ as a ministry and a partner. and with a ray of hope. And I know that we have been instrumental in making sure that folks get the help with their utilities, et cetera, through grants, that kind of thing. And I know that part of the issue has been connectivity with the city to make sure that bills aren't, like, the check can be received. So I'd like to see some of that. I'd like to understand more, like how is that happening in this time? Because I know that there's been some issues with the end user, and as someone who is always looking to make things better, I would just like to know more about that. So that's one of my goals. And the other one is more around just generally being able to be part of this. Like, you don't have to be a counselor or the mayor or the city manager in order to attend these. And I would like to see it be more accessible. I guess general accessibility is something that I would like to see, because I went on I had a constituent reach out and say, hey, how do I come to city council meeting? And I said, oh, it's really easy. You just do this, this, and this. And I decided to work through it on my own as if I didn't know, and it wasn't really easy. So anyway, just for fun. Sorry, I think my 2 minutes was up 2 minutes ago. Peace out.
All right, Councilor Puente.
Well, good evening. So for me, part of the reason joining the city council was working in the schools, being in youth ministry, working for the church, and just serving our younger population, our youth, and seeing and being in the schools and relating a lot with our families, really kind of opened my eyes a lot to the brokenness, the hurting in our community. And also kind of on Debbie's, Mrs. Cabrales' point too, of really understanding that our city in general, in many different areas across the board, lacked the mispresentation of our community. And so for me, it's just, honestly, it's really about building community, coming together. As, quote unquote, you can't have unity within community. You have to have unity to build community. And I think understanding that we are better together moving forward. And I care about my city. I love my city, and really seeing the impact, as someone said earlier too, we can talk about it, but if we have to also be about it. And so putting our words into action and really growing our community engagement, I think that's, for me, one of my biggest needs that I see, is really engaging all the community, not just the higher ups, the businesses, but really finding the gems in our community, hearing stories from our residents that really, are silent right now because maybe they don't feel like they have an opportunity. And so for me, moving forward, it's really trying to bring out some of that and really understanding, and really also as being now part of city council, is really being more visible. Because I think before I, really didn't know much or hear much of, who's our city councilors within the city, unless it was some kind of big event or so. So I think just really being more, and obviously right now with COVID, that's going to be hard, but I think post, when we kind of are able to get there, is really just being more visible and more seen, and really understanding what we're here for. And that's for our community. And just seeing, our nation obviously right now is really divided, but that's our nation, but that does not represent Woodburn. I believe Woodburn, we can set a standard for a lot of other cities here in Oregon and around us, seeing our law enforcement, seeing just the businesses, people step up to the plate. Love Santa, when that happened, that just really opened my eyes, of really just showed how much of a community, when a community comes together, I think great things can happen. And so that for me is where I'm excited to be able to just come together and move forward and working better together as a city, and bringing all walks of life, really let Woodburn be known for, a place where everybody belongs. So that's really, and goals, really, it's just really the engagement piece of how can we engage everybody. I know that's kind of broad, but I think you hear my heart of really engaging people and speaking for every group available here and let them know that, you know, the door's open, the tables, everybody's welcome at the table. So I think that's kind of my 2 minutes maybe, but I appreciate the time and look forward to working with everybody and learning from everybody too. So thank you again.
All right, then we'll end with our council president, Council Carney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe it was probably 2011 or 2012. I was at a cocktail party and in the neighborhood, and my neighbors were complaining about how things were done in the city. And probably earlier than that, I think it was probably 2010. And I said, well, so what are you doing to, you know, to help the city? And they said, well, nothing, you know. I said, do you go to council meetings? They said, no, we don't. So I said, all you're gonna do is stand around and complain. And then I got my, you know, it was a cordial conversation, but I thought to myself, I don't think I'm that kind of person. And then I got my tax bill, and I realized just exactly how much I was paying in taxes. And I said to myself, where the heck is all this money going? I didn't really have a good idea. So what I did was I went to City Hall and I tried to find out what advisory councils were available. And I signed up and was appointed to the Planning Commission. And that really opened my eyes because I got to meet people. I got to understand the comprehensive plan. But more importantly, I got to understand that one of the great problems we have is that we have a lot of land that was undeveloped and could be used for industrial activity. And then the taxes that are paid by industrial users would ultimately serve to reduce the taxes of the residential customers in the city. So I decided the only way to really influence the industrial development in the city on the west side and to work on the urban growth boundary was to become a city councilor. So I elected to run, and was fortunate that when I got in, I was able to participate in the negotiations where we actually did increase the urban growth boundary, and through a lot of talent on the part of our staff, former councilors, and others that were involved, we were able to work through the whole process. And what I discovered was that, contrary to what my neighbors were complaining about, they just had never taken the time to find out exactly what kind of team we had and how they could possibly influence that team. So that's how I basically came to it. My interests are principally interests of economic equity. I want to be absolutely sure that all the people within the city are pulling on the same rope, and that we don't have instances where there are some people that are economically contributing more to the city's condition and people that are contributing less to the city condition. That's my idea of equity. And that's what I'd like to continue to pursue. And one of my goals would be to see to it that it becomes an integral part of our goal-making process. And by the way, I think that the goal-making process worked very well before. One of the critical goals that we had was to set up a family resource center. And through the talent and capabilities of our staff, our city administrator and others, and also the organizations that were willing to join with us, we now have that as part of an imaginative plan. And it's a way for us to, it's a vehicle for us to be able to accomplish a lot of the goals that were mentioned earlier, particularly by Allie and by Ben, Debbie and Sharon. So we're on the right path. And I think that the way we continue to do this is to work together as a team, understand the contributions each of us can make, where we might differ from one another, and then find ways to accommodate that and work towards a holistic goal structure. And I found that one of the best ways to do that there's workshops. And I know the mayor is very interested in that too. So I'll turn it back to the mayor.
All right, thank you. I want to give a chance to go around one more time to anyone who would like to add any other, like, yes, I agree with so-and-so and so-and-so, or if there was something that you thought about it in the meantime that you would like to add to the conversation. So I'll just call you and you can say yes or no, but I will go back with Sharon.
Oh,
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I'd like to throw out an idea and,
Sure.
and see if the other councilors, see how the other councilors feel about it.
Great.
Over the course of the last couple of years, or at least the last year for sure, one of the things that we've done is when we've tried to solve problems, we've called for work sessions. And these work sessions are usually improvised very quickly. And, through that improvisation, I don't think that we get as much accomplished as we should get accomplished. I'd like to recommend that my fellow councilors think about this idea. I'd suggest that what we do is we set aside the second meeting at the end of every quarter. So that, for instance, that would be the second council meeting in March, the second council meeting in June, so that we know that what we're going to have is a work session that night. So that difficult issues that we encounter during the course of the quarter, we can always know that we don't have to immediately solve the problem. What we can do is we can take it under consideration for a number of weeks or perhaps a month. And we know that we're going to have a work session on that particular day, in which case we will deal with that issue that we have not been able to resolve. And we're not forced to resolve it, perhaps unpleasantly, in an immediate fashion. I think it would add strength to our teamwork if we had time to think about these things for a longer period of time, rather than being thrust into a decision-making mode immediately.
Thank you, Councilor Carney. Okay, so back to Sharon. Anything you'd like to add that you thought of in the meantime?
oh, actually, I thought of a lot of things.
Okay.
I didn't like being first. However, I loved what Allie had to say and what Ben had to say, and also what Debbie had to say. I mean, you people rock, I'll tell you. I agree. We need, I'm trying to think of the word I want. Darn, I can't think of it. We need all of us working together. I don't care what ethnicity, color, religion, whatever, I don't care. Working together is what this community is all about. And I want to be somebody that's on that goal constantly. And the other thing I wanted to say is it's been just an out and out honor to be on the council, especially with the staff that Woodburn has. And I get questions about kind of what Rob was saying. Well, what does the city council do? Well, I want to say, why don't you come to a city council meeting and see what we do? And so you can get involved. And what was it that you said, Ben? Unity comes with community, or community comes with unity. I love that. Anyway, I just wanted to say, gosh, I didn't like being first, but I got a few more ideas and wanted to end with a positive note. Okay, and one other thing I did think of something else, and this is probably in my council reports, but I'm involved with CERT, and I'll tell you, of the 109 families that we serve and lugging those 25-pound boxes to those individuals who come to the door with such big smiles and are so grateful for what we're doing. And so that 44.6 tons of food we've delivered since March has made such an impact on our community. And, you know, I give a big shout out to all of our CERT members. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Okay, back around to Mary Beth. Anything you'd like to add?
Yes. I like what Rob had to say because the situation we're in right now is so fluid that we just don't know. Maybe in a few months we'll be able to meet in person again. And I think that in person we tend to be more connected, obviously, and we might be able to get different things done if we don't make it too rigid right now. So him suggesting that it's, you know, once a month, every second meeting, I think we could try it. You know, if it doesn't work, we can always go back to what Debbie suggested was work sessions. We can have that as well. But right now, the situation doesn't lend itself to be doing that. And I think I do agree with Ben and Allie insofar as the unity in the community and the cohesiveness we have to bring together as a city. And I think we are on that path, well on that path already with the community center that we got together with Love Inc. And I'm really proud of that. And there's always room for more. There's always room for improvement. And you guys are absolutely right. That's the way we need to head to make sure everybody has a voice in this town. Young, old, no matter what nationality they represent or religion, we need to just try and do our best to bring everybody together and let them know that yes, they have a voice and they need to act on that, not sit, like Rob says, sit in the background and complain about things. That's what I used to do, and it's just time to step forward and make your voice heard and be part of the change and not just sit and complain about it. Okay, there we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Debbie.
I mean, I agree with Councilor Swanson and Councilor Puente. But other than that, I really don't have anything else to add. I think that once we have our retreat, or if we even have a retreat, like when we come together and when it's just us and we can kind of like talk about more, we can focus on certain things more. And so I think I'll wait on all of that until then.
Okay. All right, back to Councilor Swanson.
The only thing I just would like to agree with Councilor Carney. I really appreciate that perspective, Rob, because I've been to a couple of council meetings where it feels like, you know, the ticky time bomb of the clock and a decision has to be made. So I really like at the end of every quarter a more thoughtful approach to being able to revisit decisions that we're not loath to make, but need greater consideration, I think. I appreciate that perspective of putting it on as a work agenda item on a regular basis. So we know we can't finish talking about this right now, but we will revisit it. So be thinking about, planning about, you know, investigating this within your ward, or, you know, whatever the situation is. I just like it. I like it a lot, Rob. I think it merits some consensual thinking. And I really think that I was loath to become part of a organized governmental team again. I've been here before, but for such a time as this, I think I'm in the right place at the right time. And I appreciate everything that everyone's brought to the table tonight as far as the Better Together approach at 2021, Better Together. And we've seen if we can be better together during a pandemic, heads are going to roll when they finally let us out in the streets. I'm pretty excited. So again, thanks to everyone for your thoughtful comments and for sharing your heart. I'm very appreciative.
All right, Councilor Puente.
No, I too, I think also agree with Mr. Carney, Councilmember Carney, in the fact of just one, been part of many meetings in my years, but understanding that we can't let emotions get the best of us. And sometimes, it's the wrong time to make decisions when you're emotional. And I think, seen that many times. And so I think having a designated work session where you allow time to process both sides and more understanding, and being a new council member, I think that would benefit myself a lot to really dig in more, research more, or better understand what we're dealing with, and versus trying to put on the spot where I have, I could have my own views, but because I'm emotional, I may make a decision that I actually may, not necessarily regret, but don't feel like I gave enough time to process. So, but I think that's overall that. And then just the other thing is just really not letting COVID define us as Woodburn, but, letting Woodburn come out ahead. And I think I'm just thankful for, the opportunity that just seeing the work that the city has done through all this. And yes, we got, tough times ahead, obviously, economically and figuring all this out. But I'm excited because seeing the work that's already been done, I think I know we're on the right path. So it's a great job by everybody already. So.
All right, Councilor Carney, anything to add?
I know I don't have anything to add. I'm only entitled to one idea a night.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, he's got smoke coming out of his ears right now.
So my only thing just a couple things to add, other than agreement with everybody, of course, is the only other specific thing that, and I said this after the morning I woke up as mayor in 2018, was like the emergency management. And I was with Councilor Schaub and Councilor Swanson on the CERT team. Taking what we've learned from this situation in COVID and how that was emergency managed, and when the time is right, as we're getting through this, to really help us see what would happen at the next one, whether it's the earthquake or something else, or things that are coming. I think is just incumbent upon our city council and our city government to be ready for that. And so just processing that is kind of one of my overall themes. Like, let's keep processing how that's working and how it will need to work if something worse happens, or when something worse happens. But overall, other than agreeing with everyone else, I think I have been, it's kind of funny that when the city administrator handed me the charter, like probably the same day in 2018, when I said I was worried about the earthquake, and said, you should probably read this. And so this has been a chance for me, especially after the last LOC trainings, really about the roles and responsibilities. And our charter says the mayor shall establish cooperative agreement to interact between the council and the city administrator, to assist in interpretation of the council's objectives, so that the implementation of the council's objectives and actions will derive the greatest benefit to the city. So my goal this year is really to be that facilitator, and to really fulfill my role in the processes of that facilitation. And this was like step one, was just listening to everybody and have everybody listen to each other. And then I know it's I'm for all the staff on the call, I'm sure it's good for them to revisit why our veteran counselors are here and their thoughts, and for our newer counselors. That's facilitating communication, between the council and the city administrator, facilitating communication then with the staff through these meetings, and then facilitating communication with the public in the mayor's roles. So that's it. That's what I have is, and I think this helps in my other role of that, stated role that the mayor will set the agendas with the city administrator, right? And so getting a sense of in every meeting how we're tapping into what you're looking at next, what are your priorities and your things that are important to you, so that we can have agendas that reflect that. And I think, like as Councilor Carney alluded to, sometimes we just go from meeting to meeting. Like that's what we do. Like here's this meeting this month, and then we forget about it. And there's another meeting, we get up to speed right before the meeting, we do that. So I'm really dedicated to having, like in my head, like a year-long calendar, and especially with Councilor Carney's suggestion, if we're going to do work sessions every 3 months, like what would those be? Really working with the city administrator and the council president to like map those out. And we have some council goals that are still left, and as time permits, and we have the opportunity to like solidify any other goals we have. That we map those out so that when we're setting agendas for every meeting, like the goals are at the back of our packet every time, right? Almost in my head, putting them at the front of the packet as Councilor Carney and the city administrator and I are like setting the agendas. Like how are we moving forward in these, whether they're our priorities or whether our specific goals. So there's a through line through the year. So anyway, that is my 2 cents to do that. So with that, tomorrow we'll meet in our Tuesday meeting, kind of review these kinds of things, review the next steps we can take, putting things in chunks as we go forward in our main role of like setting the direction for the city. So that all right, so that item is over. So we will now do the city administrator's report, and then again, people have talked a lot. If you also have an opportunity at the very end of the meeting to like share, like I did this thing, or anything else you'd like to share. But we'll start with our city administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple things for the city council tonight. I told you at the last meeting that I would bring you up to speed on where we stand on the police chief recruitment. We know that Chief Ferreras is going to allegedly, as rumor has it, retire at the end of February, 1st of March, which will be here before you know it. So we've been mapping out a process and a plan, as you know. Oh, there he is. Hiring a police chief is a very heavy lift for the organization. It's probably the hardest hire that a city administrator gets to make. And, I'm not under any illusion that this is going to be a difficult task for us. And so I have a meeting with the police department, staff-wide or a department-wide staff meeting later this week. I'm going to bring them up to speed on where we stand, let them know there's a plan shaping up, and that we know it will take some time, but that the organization will continue to serve and do well in the interim period of time. But really what I wanted to talk to you about in terms of this process of shaping up is, as last time, there needs to be a significant community involvement component attached to a police chief, both from a policing legitimacy standpoint, buy-in into the leadership of the police department, and to also help whoever candidate is selected to walk in the door with the credibility, knowing that the community had buy-in and support in the decision-making process. The process, I think, is really important in terms of validating the selection. So, and it's kind of tricky. As you know, there's a lot of issues right now around police legitimacy in communities. We're aware of that. And we want that reflected as part of the public process that we have. And so the way it is shaping up is our timeline is probably going to put us well into summer, depending on how well it goes and the number of candidates that we can attract. And on the front end of that process, you're going to see some community process and outreach. So I'm talking with Jesse, who has, through our COVID response, developed some pretty significant inroads to some of the various aspects of our community that we now want to utilize to leverage that asset into this process. And so we're going to probably use some of our consultants that have helped us reach the various components of our community to also facilitate conversations around police chief profile development. And you're going to see that shape up probably not too long after the chief is gone. You're also going to see targeted outreach to the business community, to our pastoral community, and to other groups, senior estates and others who we want to take input in terms of the development of the profile, the leadership characteristics, commensurate with the needs that our community sees in this process. And when that work is done, the city will then do a national-wide recruitment, and we will try to push out through multiple and different avenues to reach as broad and as diverse a group of qualified candidates as we can to develop interest in our community. And then we'll have, when we're able to then process those candidates, and I'm knocking on my wood table that we're going to have a group of qualified candidates that meet the profile that we've developed through this public process. We will then conduct a significant interview process that will also include members of all those other groups that we talked about. And then, of course, there's significant background checking in all of that. It will take some time for us to do this, but it's kind of shaping up, and I feel good about it. I do know that it will be a real push for us, just given that we're in this COVID environment and how difficult it is to do things remotely. And so there you have it on that. It's still a bit of a progress in work, but I think the outline is starting to look and feel good. And I know that we've got depth of leadership in the police department that we can rely on and be confident about through however long this process is going to take.
All right. Anything else?
And the other thing I had for you is that, I've gotten some questions. There's been some community questions about people who have been carrying firearms in public in Woodburn. And I know that's can be a cause of alarm for some people. I've asked Chief just briefly to talk a little bit about that. People who are open carrying or demonstrating or advocating for Second Amendment rights, and show up to a place in the city with weapons. Chief, can you respond to some of those concerns that people have maybe seen in Woodburn recently?
Sure, thanks, Scott. Hi, Mayor and Council. I'm Jim Ferris, your police chief, at least for a few more weeks. We have had some reports of folks carrying firearms in the city and public places in open display. And Oregon is an open carry state and does not regulate the open carry of firearms in public places or premises open to the public. And there's a couple of folks that are well known to us that we get a lot of calls on that understand the law, that make sure they stay within the law, but they push it to the boundary, but they stay within the law. So there's little we can do from a police standpoint. It does cause some fear and alarm within our community when people see folks with long guns on sidewalks and in business districts and neighborhoods. But that's the world we live in, and those are the laws we have on the books today. So we monitor those situations and keep tabs on it in terms of our response to the calls for service. And quite honestly, the folks that have been engaged in that legal conduct have been pretty darn cooperative with us. So it has not been an issue other than a public alarm issue. But in terms of any violation of the law, there hasn't been one presented that we were able to act.
Thanks, Chief. And so what should somebody do if they see somebody and are alarmed? What would be your advice to them?
Well, they can certainly call the police. We encourage people who see someone with a firearm because to the contrary, it could be someone who's engaged in some criminal activity. It could be an armed robber, it could be a burglar, it could be some other criminal, or it could be a law-abiding citizen. So we want people to call us when they see that observe that conduct, and we'll respond, we'll investigate, and make a determination whether it's something we can act on or should act on.
Thanks, Chief. Does anybody have any questions about that for Chief, or has anybody expressed any concerns to you? No? Okay. Mr. Mayor, another thing I want to tell the council about tonight, and I don't know if Councilor Cabrales is on, I see her there. Tonight was kind of an experiment for us on this meeting in that the city is trying out a new translation service for our meetings that will translate these meetings live into Spanish on a particular service via the phone. So you can either log on to our meeting and then dial in to listen to the live Spanish translation, or you can listen to it live on a phone line. And we're also then recording all of the content of this meeting as well in Spanish with the Spanish translation services. And so it's kind of a trial run to see how well that works. And if it's a good product or service that we can then take out and market to the community for people who want to listen or watch and listen to the city council meeting live with real-time Spanish translation. I don't know yet if they provide other language services, but this is kind of a trial run for us tonight.
Scott. Thank you, Scott, for that.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's kind of difficult to find quality and good translation services, so we're really hoping this is going to be good, and it's a service we can rely on. I had a meeting with.
Can I ask a question about that?
Okay, sure. I'm sorry. Who was that?
This is Allie. Can I ask you a follow-up?
Okay. Yeah.
One quick follow-up. How will you judge the efficacy of that, and how long of a time frame are you giving it to determine whether or not it's effective?
Well, we'll take a look at how it worked tonight with our Spanish-speaking staff, who will, we do have high-level Spanish-speaking and professional translate, who write and speak at a professional level with the city. They'll take a look at that and let us know. And plus, Allie, or Councilor Swanson, we also hear from the community as well if the translation services are poor.
Right. And that's all I wondered. I wondered how you would judge the efficacy. Basically, you're just asking staff to use it as they were an end user and determine whether or not they found it effective. Like if it makes sense. I've used poor translators, so I completely understand what that looks like. I just wondered, is it, we're just going to try it tonight, and if our staff doesn't like it, we're going to move on, or like, what does that look like?
Right. Well, we have people at the city that are high-level Spanish-speaking and Spanish writers that will be able to tell us pretty quickly if it's a quality service. I'm concerned about, does it really track or not track if somebody wants to watch, or how well it works. We'll take a look at it. We may experiment in other approaches too as they become available to us.
So this is like level 1 of a filtering, and once we find what's deemed to be an effective and meets all that criteria, and then it'll be blasted out there. This is the service we're using, and then it'll be over like Radio Poder and some of the communication. We'll be able to, people will know it's a thing.
Yeah, if it's a service we like and we think that it's quality and that it tracks and that people can participate in the meeting in Spanish, in a way that is accurate, then we'll push that information out.
Awesome. I look forward to hearing more about that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, I can come back at our next council meeting and give you an update on it. I met with staff last week, and one of the challenges that we're looking at is summer activities and events, but primarily the fiesta, because we have to start making commitments to around the fiesta now. And we know that we've lost most of our sponsors. I believe that some of the support businesses that provide services and entertainment have gone out of business because of COVID. And so we're grappling with what does that look like with the uncertainty of whether or not we'll even be able to still gather this summer, given, you know, the schedule for easing of restrictions on COVID. You know, it doesn't look great. We're trying to, part of the plan, I think, is to try to shoot for having a community-wide celebration at some point, late summer, early fall, something we can pull together quickly that looks maybe a little bit like the First Street celebration we did, as a way just to celebrate when we can all get together again as a community. I'll keep you posted on where we stand on all of that. Fiesta may require some time to rebuild. You know, we may be looking like a lot of our parks and rec services, aquatic center and library services. What does a startup plan look like for those kind of post-COVID? I want you to know that we're thinking about it and we're working on it, and there's still a lot of uncertainty around a lot of those park and rec programming and the fiesta for this summer. And then finally, I'll just wrap up, Mr. Mayor, by saying that on Thursday, I think we're going to see our two new city councilors in the first of what will probably be a couple orientations, introducing them to the city and sort of all the things that city councilors do and a few of the things that you should try to avoid to keep yourself out of trouble. And I'm looking forward to that. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
All right. We'll go back around in the same order we had before so people know what order it is. So is there anything you'd like to add, Sharon, to your as a council report?
No, thank you. I'm fine. Thanks.
Okay. Mary Beth?
I'm coming. No, I'm good. I just want to wish everybody a happy new year, and I'm glad to be back because I'm glad to be somewhere. Thanks.
Okay, Councilor Cabrales?
No, at the moment, I don't have any.
Okay. Councilor Swanson?
Nada.
Councilor Puente?
I remembered one quick shout out or to the city, Jesse, Maricela, the CERT team with Sharon, that I didn't realize that when we gave those, that with the food boxes that were given out, that they were given a $100 gift card with it. And so that was a blessing to hear. I heard from a few families in the district that received that too. And so that was a unexpected surprise. So a great shout out for the work to receive those grants and what, you know, just doing that, blessing these families with that. So, and then the second shout out is again to our law enforcement. It's good to see almost a full staff back out and seeing our motorbikes out again. So I think that's also, you know, definitely a need because of all these speed racers. So I'm hopeful, but thankful again for the job that they're doing. And even though you kind of get a bad rap right now, but I do appreciate all they do and the sacrifice they make for us here in our city. And so keep up the great work and thank you.
All right, Councilor Carney?
I just want to compliment Jesse and the staff for the comprehensive presentation that they made on COVID. It's very timely and very informative. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll just have two things. This Thursday, the Woodburn Planning Commission's it's hosting its third annual Rent Bird meeting to discuss affordable housing in Woodburn. And so if you're interested in that, that's I think I went to the last one they had it at Success High School. And then finally, I met with Scott and Tommy this morning yesterday about the state of the city. So last year at this time, we were preparing a state of the city address, and that happened in mid-February. And the joke was that like the mayor talked so long that the advice was, why don't you just like make little videos next year, and you can like just introduce videos and then sit down, so we don't have to hear your voice for like an hour and a half. So, but that one was a good idea, and two, it's the only idea now for the state of the city with to do it by video this year. So we came up with like 8 or 9 different kind of categories of groups to honor. So obviously, like the first one is people in assisted living situations, the workers and the staff. The other in our medical clinics. The other would be our first responders. And then to be highlighting all the work our economic development department did, the work obviously that Jesse headed up with the COVID response. So they would each be like 8 or 9 different like videos that. But what I would like to propose is that as we kind of flesh those out and then send them to you, and you can send back any other ideas, like maybe you should add this or don't forget about that. Was it in the video, instead of you all being introduced at the beginning, just with your pictures like you were at the last State of the City, is that each person could like introduce the, that particular thing. So if Councilor Shaw, wanted to introduce the something about assisted livings, she could, introduce herself and then say a word of thanks to the people in assisted living. So then Councilor Puente would have another one. And then we would like set a date for this so that people would know, okay, it's going to be February, whatever it's going to be. And, put it on live. And so Tommy could put it on Facebook Live and put it in different platforms. So people could like watch the whole thing, sit down and watch the whole thing if they would like to just take an hour of their lives to, to see what our state of the city is and who we're honoring. But then it would also be like individual 8 or 9 individual videos that people could click on afterwards, or they could watch it in a different format too. So anyway, that's for that. So we'll get a list to you of everyone of just kind of these different areas, and then you can like please feel free to comment about anything we're overlooking or particular things about each area that we should highlight. All righty. I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so I move in a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Our next meeting is in 2 weeks and it will be a rather a long meeting over a land use planning thing. So in your brains, get ready to, we'll get some training ahead of that. And then, but at that meeting, we'll probably devote the majority of that meeting to our land use planning decision. And so we'll be getting information to that out after our Tuesday meeting tomorrow with some updates about that. So look for an email tomorrow or Wednesday about what our next meeting will be. All righty.
Very good. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
This conference is no longer being recorded.